Good morning, everybody. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me? Yes, I think I am, right? All right. My name is Monique van Dusseldorp, and I will be the moderator of this super interesting webinar. And the first thing I'm going to do is explain a little bit how everything works. And after that, I'm going to invite Roel Vermeulen to join me for a real welcome. Now, first of all, you see the screen. On the left, you already see 61 people present. We know a lot more will arrive shortly. Scroll through that list. This is also a get-together of people super interested in this topic. So scroll to that list. If you see people you want to know or that you know, you can click on the name and start a private chat. So you can just exchange some words, say hello, share your thoughts and so forth. So use that, make connections. And then next to that, you see the public chat, and that is what we will use as well. I mean, I already said my welcome there and ruled it, but you can also use the public chat to ask questions to our speakers later on, to also come up with your own projects and your own plans that, of course, should be related to the topic we're discussing today. But use that chat channel as a channel that you can use for the whole duration of the event. So feel free to use that. Now, last but not least, it's very simple, but I think now everybody knows more or less, but you see the screen on the right, and you can actually yourself, for you, change the size of the slides in relation to the size of the video. Just, pull your mouse, pull your arrow in between the two, and you can pull it up and down, so you can make one bigger and the other smaller. And on the bottom of the screen, you can see mute. You should be on mute right throughout until at the end, and I'll explain later on. And you see the webcam where you can also start sharing. Now let me start by asking Roel to unmute himself and start sharing his webcam so that he can do the official welcome. And Roel, he has many things. Now I'll keep talking while his video kicks in. Oh, there he is already. Hi, Roel. First of all, you are, of course, the scientific director of the Data and Knowledge Hub. And the Data and Knowledge Hub, Healthy Urban Living. That's the organization that organizes these webinars. But you are also, and I'm just mentioning it, it's not so important for this event, but it is important because it shows that we have 3 speakers today that have very specific knowledge that is so useful in these projects. You're an professor of environmental epidemiology, but you are also the director of the director of the Risk Assessment Institute. Basically, you are specialized in the risks that come from living in a city for your health. Very broadly speaking. Cool. Why does the Data and the Kennis Hub organize these meetings?
Thanks, Monique, and thanks everybody in this webinar. We organize these meetings really to network with everybody and to really openly discuss the challenges that we have in our living environments to make them more healthy. And this is such a huge challenge that we really need to do that in a quadruple helix collaboration. And I think today is one of those examples where city planners, private companies, and the knowledge hubs, actually knowledge centers, come together. If I may, we talked about in the webinars before summer about smart monitoring. How can we actually do novel sensors, for instance, on bikes, which we talked about in the Sniffer Bike project, where citizens collect data. But it's of course not only citizens that collect data, it's also public institutions like the RIVM that collect data about our living environments. And it's also private companies that collect data. And what is so important is that we make all this data fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, so that everybody can use those data and insights to make it actionable. That's actually where we talked about in the last seminars to see basically how data can be visualized to make it actionable and to actually be able to come up with healthy urban design principles. And I think what we're going to do today, and which I'm really excited about, and of course a little bit biased because I was involved in this project, but it really shows how we actually can bring smart monitoring together with healthy urban design principles, and how we actually can bring that into concrete new plans for redesigning parts of the cities that would be more healthy. And it really connects smart monitoring with these urban design principles to really get to an actionable result that hopefully then is picked up by the cities and others to actually implement that. And I think that's what we're going to hear today. And I think that's going to be a very stimulating discussion.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your welcome. You will also be back in the program later on for all kinds of questions and answers. Thank you. Now, as you saw, somebody accidentally put on the video. If that happens again, I'll just ask them to turn it off again. We are going to start very shortly with our speakers, but first of all, I did mention that chat channel. Now, this webinar is about adding air quality to city planning. And my question to you is, are you yourself working in projects that, work on air quality in relation to city planning? Tell us about it. So seriously, introduce yourself in the chat channel and say, okay, I am so-and-so and I'm working on this particular project, air quality to city planning. I'm just, some people are starting typing already. I'm giving you just 2 minutes, just introduce yourself so that we know who's out there is also working on this kind of project. And don't be shy, it's a group of 98 super interested people, very relevant to each other's work. So we love hearing from you. Oh, I see, as you can see on the bottom, several delegates are now typing away. This gives me the time to introduce our next speaker. I already mentioned that we have a super interesting lineup today. We have somebody with a background in architecture. We have somebody with a background in environmental science. We have science. We have business. Our first speaker is going to be Karen Tuxton-Batman, who's the program manager at Google AirView. Yes, Google is here. And her presentation will be followed by Jeff Razum, who's a partner and chief innovation officer at Gehl. And they will speak about a very interesting and specific project called Google AirView. Now, Karen is already long. Oh, there you are, Karen. Welcome. I looked you up, of course, and you have also a background in geospatial innovation, right? You're an environmentalist at heart, and you ended up at Google and now doing good things there, true? All right, you have to unmute yourself. We can't hear you yet. There you go.
There you go.
Hello. Welcome again.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you so much. Should I take it away?
Yes, take it away.
Okay,
there you go.
Fantastic, fantastic. I'm going to share my screen here. Well, while that comes up, I just want to say thank you to Monique and to Roel and team for the invitation to be here today at this webinar and to speak on this panel today. It is an honor. I'm a night owl, so it's about 2 a.m. Right now in California, where I'm based. But I was joking that if I were to travel to come to this webinar in person, I'd probably be jet lagged. So it's about the same. But I'm a night owl, so I'll be with you the whole time. So yeah, thanks again for having me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Google's background in the project around collecting air quality data, and then I'll hand it over to Jeff from Gehl Architect to take it from there. So 7 years ago, I helped to start Google's effort to map air quality street by street in cities around the world. And we used a resource that we had available to us, Street View cars. And we worked with scientists to equip those cars with air quality sensing equipment so that they would measure air pollution once every second as the car drove down streets in cities. And we were already driving these cars to capture 360-degree panoramic images for Google Maps. So we thought, why not use them also as environmental sensing platform. And so we started working on this project in 2013, and we started doing the testing in California to test the science of this idea of using street view cars to map air pollution. And in 2017, the initial work in Oakland, California was published, along with the scientific publication in the Journal of Environmental Science and Technology. And what was great about this first paper, this first project, that Roel was a member of the scientific team, it showed two things. One, it proved that it was possible to use mobile mapping to create a street-by-street hyperlocal map of annual average concentration of air pollution. It proved it was possible. It proved it was possible by conducting repeated drive passes throughout the year. It also showed, number two, that air pollution did vary block by block or street by street, sometimes up to 5 to 8 times within a city block. And then our partners at the nonprofit Environmental Defense Fund teamed up with a healthcare research group here in California called Kaiser Permanente. And Kaiser Permanente took that data and paired it with 40,000 patient records. And they found that heart disease was related to the parcel level annual concentration of air pollution that we collected, the data we captured. And so this work was published also in the Journal of Environmental Health. And so this was very interesting and gratifying because it showed that this type of measurement, this hyperlocal measurement, could be linked to health impact assessments and to help give these kind of health insights and air quality insights within a city. And over several years, we captured a lot more air quality measurements and have since shared that data with over 200 scientists who have then in turn published over 7 peer-reviewed scientific publications that we know of. And we carry out this work with one goal. Our goal is to help cities and other groups, other organizations within cities make decisions toward healthier, more sustainable cities. And so in 2018, we were very excited to begin partnerships with both the cities of Copenhagen and the city of Amsterdam to measure hyperlocal air quality, to build an annual average street-by-street map, and so that they could use this in combination with other data that they were already using for their air quality work. We feel really fortunate that we were able to collaborate with both the cities of Amsterdam and the cities of Copenhagen, along with our scientific partners at Utrecht, led by Roel Vermeulen here, as well as our partners at the Gehl architects based in Copenhagen. So what you're looking at here is a preliminary map, hyperlocal map of air pollution, in this case, ultrafine particles in the city of Copenhagen, that is currently, that we released last October at the Copenhagen-based C40 World Mayors Summit with the city of Copenhagen and Utrecht. And it shows where the hotspots are in the city. It shows which roads, which neighborhoods, which regions of the city that the city of Copenhagen can start pinpointing policies and thinking about actions to take. And that's the point I want to make next, is that these hyperlocal air pollution measurements are really actionable for cities because of different ways that they can use the data. Number one, they can pinpoint policies, right? They can figure out which cities, or which parts of the city have hotspots for air pollution, and they can focus their policies, focus their actions on those areas first. They can reduce exposure to air pollution. Oftentimes, they might want to prioritize areas where vulnerable population live, for example, youth or seniors, and be able to move or plan the cities, plan the neighborhoods to reduce exposure for those populations. And then they can track their progress over time of those actions, of those policies, if they measure year over year. And finally, they can bring the public along with them, which is always, of course, very important, so that the public sees the same data that the city's working off of, et cetera. So the cities, having the public see, oh, that's my neighborhood or that's my parents' neighborhood, really makes them understand, okay, this is why we're taking this kind of action. This is why these policies are being put into place. And as you'll hear next, the city of Copenhagen teamed up with Gehl architects to use this data to design the next generation of healthy cities in Copenhagen, calling them Thrive Zones, really focused on children under the age of 5. And so I'm not going to spoil Jeff's talk, but he's going to be talking right after me, and he'll speak a lot more about this project next. As you can see, these air quality insights are very helpful for taking action on air pollution, of course, but also on climate and emissions. And so we really hope that these air quality insights are a useful part of a free tool that we built a few years ago called the Environmental Insights Explorer. And I hope I can just say a few words about this, because what we're really hoping is that air quality can be paired with other types of environmental insights and help cities take action on climate, air pollution, and health. So Environmental Insights Explorer is a tool where cities can go and see annual data for building and transportation emissions in their city, which is based on Google Maps buildings data and Google Maps traffic data aggregated for the entire city and for the entire year over year. And you can also see their rooftop solar potential data, which we've calculated from Google Maps 3D building data. And so we take all these annual emissions and solar data and we make it freely available on this tool. Today, there's data for over 3,000 cities, all intended to help them take climate action. And cities can go there today and search and see if they're one of the 3,000 cities that we have data for today. And if they are, they can claim their data and start using it in their climate action plans and their air quality and climate policies. The tool is intended to help cities, like it says here, estimate building emissions using the building emissions estimates, measure annual transit activity. And it's very interesting because the insights actually show the breakdown by mode, such as the number of automobile trips per year, the number of bicycle trips per year, and so on, so that the cities can start tackling how to reduce automobile trips and increase bicycle trips and track that year over year. And of course, I mentioned the solar rooftop. They can identify carbon reduction opportunities through solar energy on the rooftops, and where to place PV photovoltaic panels, how much of a gigawatt or megawatt cities of solar energy can they become potentially. In the future, we plan to add air quality to this list and help cities identify air pollution reduction opportunities. And we've already started doing this little by little by releasing air quality maps for 2 cities, Copenhagen, in which the maps are preliminary, and London, another project that we're doing with Environmental Defense Fund nonprofit. And so if you go to this website today, you can see these hyperlocal maps of Copenhagen and other maps in the future that we release with our partners. And finally, we are in the process of completing all the drives in Amsterdam, and we're really excited to announce that the equipment, the car and the air quality equipment, will soon be donated to the University of Utrecht to be used for the Data Knowledge Hub. We're really happy that this mobile lab can live on and continue to be useful for both scientific inquiry and research, as well as policymaking going forward. And with that, I'll say thank you so very much, and I'll hand it over to Jeff from Gehl Architects. Thank you.
Oh, wait 1 second. I'm here for... Karen, thank you so much. First of all, on behalf of everybody in Utrecht, of course, thank you so much for this enormous gift you donated. Karen, delighted with that.
It'll live on. That's important.
Yeah.
I'm so happy.
We have time after Jeff's presentation for a lot of questions. So, but just one... where will this go? Is this going to be a worldwide thing, all cities, or what's the plan there? Yeah,
I mean, air quality is a huge challenge, and Google likes to tackle big challenges. And so we obviously definitely want to go global with this. We're going slow because we want the science to be proven out, but We are, we do have plans that we announced a while back to expand the mapping program to more areas around the globe. Right now, we plan to add air quality sensors to 50 more cars around the world to measure air quality on other continents besides North America and Europe. So more to come there.
Okay, well, lucky us that we, as the Netherlands are already in and heavily. All right, but we're going to watch what's happening in Copenhagen now. So thank you, Karen. You can switch off and we'll see you back later on. And I'm inviting Jeff. So switch on your mic and camera and tell us all about what Gehl has been doing in Copenhagen, which, for us, people from the Netherlands, is such a relatable city scale and level. Jeff, the floor is yours.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Real pleasure to be here, and also to be together with Roel and with the center that you've created, and with Karen and the Google team, because it is, as Roel mentioned, just so important if we want to make change in cities, and we are interested in not only change around air quality, but also broadly around inclusive, healthy, and sustainable cities. If we want to achieve that, it will definitely take this type of collaboration that I will tell you a little bit more in depth about some designs to actually make it happen. I'll just start off quickly just about Gehl. We're probably not as recognizable of a name as Google. So very quickly about our practice. We work globally, have offices in Copenhagen, New York, and San Francisco, have always been interested in people first transformations. So places like Times Square in New York, or also working in places like Bangladesh, which obviously has very different challenges, but Homo sapiens are common in each of them. And so the idea of making these healthy, inclusive, and sustainable cities is really our purpose. As I mentioned, we have also had a chance to work in many places around the world and actually collect a different type of data throughout over 200 cities, actually. So we've collected lived experience data that I'll tell you some more about, which complements and augments data like that the Insights team, Google Insights team, has collected. But we have we call it thick data set, as opposed to maybe big data, which I'll also talk more about. Another real key to our work, I'll talk a lot about this idea of lived experience, is we want to understand how people live in real places and real neighborhoods, and also recognize that, of course, lots of folks make conscious decisions. They might be aware of global challenges, climate change, and they want to act sustainably. We also know that a whole lot of people, the majority actually, are short on money and time, resources, and actually just want to do what's best for them and their loved ones. So taking both of those, extremes of the human condition into account, we want to then shape what we build, design some of these systems to react to those to that human behavior. And specifically, the question is, well, how does the built environment, how does our cities form? The shape of it, the height of buildings, where we locate trees, where we put our roads, where we invite our citizens to spend time, how does that relate to air quality, and how might we change some of those urban planning and urban design decisions with the insights that Karen mentioned? And so this Thrive Zone work is a very concrete example of that. And what the beginning focus is actually on this group, the 0 to 5 group that Karen mentioned. And that's an interesting group. We've all been there. We can all relate. Every single person has been 95 centimeters tall at some point in their life. But it's important to remember sort of what that was like. The world, our city, other people look very different from that angle. And so early on, we try to put ourselves in the shoes of a 3-year-old moving through the city. So just show this small video, putting a GoPro camera on my colleague, just to get a sense of, wow, what is it like to cross the street in Copenhagen. A bike-friendly place, obviously like Dutch cities, but those bikes also can seem a little bit imposing, not to mention things like big trucks and buses. So this is the lived experience, at least a little glimpse into it of a small person at that 95 centimeter height. So if we understand that visual, it's also important to understand biologically what's happening in those small bodies. First of all, there's research is pointing in the direction, and Roel could talk more about this, that perhaps these ultrafine particles are even more damaging and pose higher health risks than other ones. But regardless, we do know with a lot of certainty that 90% of children's brain development happens up until 5 years old. That's when the brain is growing and changing, and air pollution might have an impact there. And we also know that children breathe about 4 times as fast as adults. So if there's bad particles in the air, they're taking in 4 times as many of them than adults would be, given that they're breathing 4 times faster while that brain is developing. So it's a little bit of a dangerous combination, or one that's especially urgent. So we also want to recognize that obviously this is a giant interconnected global issue. Air pollution is from cars and vehicles, but also from all sorts of other sources of emissions. And this is something that's going to take a very long time to figure out, but we want to be action-oriented. We talk about our work being action-oriented planning. How do we do something now to incrementally begin to improve everyday life and health, especially of the youngest residents in the city, while we're moving towards that big systemic change? And as Karen alluded to, two strategies became quite clear in terms of this, what we can do now. We can reduce the exposure to air pollution in places where the air is bad and children spend time, and we can invite small children to spend time where air quality is good, where it's better. And obviously, this combination, this partnership between the incredible innovation and technology that Google is providing, together with not only the city of Copenhagen and Utrecht, but also the Bernard van Leer Foundation, who help support this project as well, who are especially focused on small children. Now we have really a great recipe for collaboration. So what we started to do, what Karen mentioned, this is all about knowing what the hotspots are and where we can take action. So we focused in on one of these hotspots, neighborhood called Vesterbro in Copenhagen, looked at areas that had a lot of daycares and playgrounds in connection with where that air quality was a bit more poor. So you've seen this map, really incredible and comprehensive, collected over many years' time, and began to combine that then, well, how do we look at these maps and get data, but also go out and talk with daycare providers, with kindergarten teachers, and find out, well, what routes do they take? We could look at a map and say, that playground is really close to this daycare center, but when we went in and spoke with the daycare teachers, they would say, oh, we never go to that playground because the street is unsafe. Or we actually use this place over here, which isn't a playground at all, but it's got great places to climb and play in puddles of water, right? And for the most part, we always take the kids out in the morning between 9 and 12:30. So just some of the insights that we also get from talking to people in connection with this data. So I mentioned, and I showed the map of the world and showing locations where we have collected data around lived experience. And what we've tried to do is connect these two data sets, right? So we created a dashboard, a data dashboard where we have information about where the target audience, these 0 to 5-year-olds, where are they in high concentrations in the neighborhood, and connect that together with where the air quality is the poorest, and triangulate then, well, here's a place, lots of kids, bad air quality, that is a place where we should do something, right? So here's just another little bit more graphic way to look at these hotspots in terms of children's usage. Go out and observing, here you have 350 or so children a day passing through. Other places might be much fewer children. And then triangulating that where, again, a lot of kids, bad air, we should reduce exposure. A lot of kids, or a fair amount of kids in good air, here we can begin to invite. So the key also is to put these together, right? We don't want to just move the problem or prioritize one user group over another. That's really challenging. At least the idea is to think in a network, to think at the neighborhood level, and to be very aware of where we're doing what and for who, right? So we get this network, this neighborhood plan, and we could call it a healthy neighborhood plan, or a air quality plan, a cleaner air network, right? Where we know the places we want to reduce exposure and the places where we want to invite. So we zoomed in on two particular areas based on this this criteria. The first scheme would be about reduction. And here we chose a street. Interestingly enough, Copenhagen constantly investing in its public realm. This is a street that had been recently upgraded. And we just had about a 10 million euro upgrade, where a lot of things were improved, but air quality wasn't on the agenda at that point just 3 or 4 years ago when this was done. So here you have still a place with a lot of car traffic, a lot of on-street parking, and again, this idea with a lot of babies and their caregivers spending time. So what can we do? How do we make relatively minor, actually, improvements, because a lot of money is already being invested here? How can we add just that other layer to make a difference? Well, we can think more about this this green buffer, and there's some studies that show that the further you can be from traffic, the less exposed you are. Karen also alluded to that. Roel can talk much more about some of the emerging science here, but we know that these distance both from intersections and from the traffic itself can help. We know that, hey, by removing parking, you can induce fewer cars to go there. If there's less places to park, less vehicles travel, and even try to think very much about slow traffic speeds. Constant and consistent speeds are also better than braking and accelerating in terms of air pollution. So we can put all of these elements together and create basically a new vision for the street that looks and feels like Copenhagen, but has some additional elements. And as Karen also mentioned, the key here too is that we're engaging with citizens, right? The same citizens who helped shape the investment that the city made in the street now are equipped with more tools, more vocabulary, more demands to say, hey, the next time the city is doing a project, and we know the conditions around air quality, there's a lot of air pollution in a place, hey, why not think about these things? So we're constantly sort of shifting and improving the conversation between citizens and their leaders. The other strategy here is about inviting, right? So here's an area where, again, lots of kids every single day, pretty good air quality here, in part because there's not a lot of vehicles and it's right next to a park, but it's a horrible place to be. The urban design here is really, really poor. It's a difficult place to navigate. And so, again, this is just obviously a very rough sketch concept, but we can begin to integrate some of the same principles. We can make it more comfortable with wider sidewalks. We can create separated bike lanes, so it's much easier for side-by-side cycling between caregivers and their kids. We can narrow the road width to allow vehicles to just move slower, make the street safer. Introduce that green buffer to keep the distance. Add greenery, not only for air pollution's case, but just because it makes the place nicer and more inhabitable. And so for us, the key is to connect sort of core areas that we all know, core principles of good urban design, but again, just adding a little bit more care, a little bit more thoughtfulness towards the air pollution element, but making sure that we retain those core qualities as well. The last thing we want to do is end up making, streets and neighborhoods that have really, really good air quality, but aren't livable, or that aren't inviting. So it's always a balance between some of these, qualitative elements, just like adding seating, which doesn't impact air quality at all, but still make sure that we're keeping the neighborhood livable as we go. So again, add those together. These principles could be a key for rejuvenating streets, inviting people to spend more time. So in general, we think there's never been a stronger case between win-win initiatives that are good for people's health, both individual and collective health, and that are also good for climate. And we've known this for a while, actually, but again, we've missed some of the science, we've missed some of the technology that's coming from Google, and we've missed some of the basic platform to discuss between citizens and city leaders and one another to begin to take action. The other thing that we've actually been missing up to now, but this project illustrates, is this combination, right, that I mentioned about the big data, this comprehensive data set with incredible technology that Google is providing, together with this, we use technology too for our data collection, but it's lo-fi, it's simple, but it's very much thick data. It's more about this lived experience. It's on the street. It's observing these, strange little phenomenons. It's seeing how kids play or how they don't. And the magic is really when we put those together, we could tell both human stories that are comprehensive and backed up with science and data. It becomes pretty powerful. The last thing I also want to indicate is of course, we know that we need to attack this issue of air pollution from at least two tracks, right? The one is about behavior change, and that's what we're designing for. We're designing for behavior change by users and by municipal leaders through this process. We also need to design for limiting the source of the emissions, right? And that's something that admittedly this project doesn't really get to, but we hope to begin to do much more work with that. But the hope is that we can have quantifiable positive health outcomes that are a result of both of these two tracks of initiatives. So for me, it seems like all the cities that have, in every city has these challenges. It's amazing that Google's thinking about scaling this up to 50 other cities. We also are working with air quality in cities that have not as comprehensive measurements as Copenhagen and Amsterdam do. So it's still just a question of beginning to make the invisible visible, both in terms of air pollution, but also in terms of some of the city's most vulnerable residents, and begin to make life a little bit better for them incrementally. Thanks.
Thank you. Wait a minute till my webcam kicks in. Before I ask the other speakers to join us for a Q&A with the audience, I actually have a question for you. I mean, this is fantastic research. So you have the big data sets, you have the very local data sets, you know exactly where things should change. And then it struck me that the changes that you suggested are suggestions. They haven't been implemented, have they? And this is Gehl from Copenhagen, probably very good relation with the local government and, global reputation. So what's the relation between the research you've done and the city authorities? How do they look at it?
Yeah, it's a challenge, and it's been a little bit frustrating, to be honest, because I think, air pollution and this notion of health is a truly, it's a cross-cutting issue. It crosses some municipal departmental silos. It crosses, the many different citizen groups, the life cycle sort of our lived experience in cities. And because it touches so many people and so many institutions, it becomes almost a little bit of a paralyzing challenge of who will actually take the lead on it. And here, that's been one of the hiccups, has been, you made
the best possible case. 3-year-olds. Who doesn't want to put 3-year-olds?
Exactly. That's what we thought. That's what we thought. And again, we have that support from the city, but cities aren't equipped to deal necessarily with these cross-cutting issues. And so there's a challenge of just municipal governance, and that we actually also have to address. So the science needs to be there, the support from the private sector needs to be there, and then we also have to equip the public sector with the tools to tackle these comprehensive challenges in a way that they don't necessarily have the tools to do right now. So again, I'm interested.
There's somebody in Copenhagen who said, but I've done this 2 years ago and I have now other projects, or is there, because the case seems quite obvious.
Yeah.
It's just finding the right authority within the city that can make these decisions, and the decision is spread out over different departments, something like this.
Exactly. And it's about, the city transformation process can sometimes be slow, and waiting for funding, and if funding hasn't been allocated for particular air pollution interventions, then it's too late because all the funding's been distributed. So it's really like some kind of boring, I think, low practical barriers that are standing in the way. But I just want to, come on, it's 3-year-old, we have the plan, let's do it. It shouldn't be that hard.
And also what I hear in your story about this particular street, where they did a whole renovation to make it so much better, but they didn't take air quality into the equation when they made their decisions. Basically, you want to have all these data sets at the beginning of the process, right, and not afterwards. So
yeah, and it's new science, right? And that's why I think, again, it's exciting that the Utrecht and Roel and his team are developing that science, and then that Google is thinking about starting in these cities. I think because then you can begin from the beginning and make sure that it's baked in to regeneration projects, to street upgrades, to mobility projects, to whatever kind of, it seems like a no-brainer to almost any kind of urban improvement should be incorporating some of these principles that we're picking up.
Now let's invite our other speakers back to our screen. So Karen and Roel, if you could switch on your mic as well as your camera, because there are, a lot was happening in the chat. It's funny to see, people finding each other just by mentioning, oh, I'm working on this and I'm working on this. Oh, we should meet, we should cooperate. So that's, annual, but that's how we meet each other at the moment. But there are also quite a few questions. Let's get Roel and Karen back on screen. And just to explain, we have till 11 o'clock for the main session, and we'll wrap it up for those that have to go on to other meetings, but we actually do have time afterwards as well to continue the conversation and to have more questions and so forth. So feel free to add lots of questions to the chat, or hang on as well later on to engage in a more personal conversation with our speakers. Is Karen still around?
There I am.
Oh, there you are.
It wasn't connecting for a moment.
Yeah, it also takes a while to get started. Now, let me kick off the first thing that was mentioned. So, Karen, you from Google kindly gave away the car, not the data. Somebody mentioned in the chat, like, do they give away the data? No, the whole car, the whole equipment, the whole technology to Roel, to the Data and Knowledge Hub, Data and Knowledge Hub. Roel, what is the Data and Knowledge Hub going to do with this lovely gift?
Well, we of course are very thankful that we actually can continue the work that we have done now in Copenhagen and Amsterdam. And I think the presentation by Jeff pointed out what the power of this data can be. And I think Karen can talk this as well about the first experience we had in Oakland. And when we can make this kind of data available to everybody, you create a level play field. Everybody has the same data, and so you have to talk about what is the reason that certain areas may be unhealthier or different than other areas, and how can we change that. And I think one of the power of this visualization and this kind of data is to actually bring up that discussion and talk about exactly what Jeff was talking about. How can we actually then achieve change, and what are our options, and how do we do that? So I think that is the power that it has, and we are thankful that we can do that, and we are very willing, and we also said that in the chat, to see basically what are the other cities that are interested to actually try to build up this hyperlocal scale, which neighborhoods are interested in trying to do what Jeff did in Copenhagen, and think about urban design principles and changing things.
But practically, so you have the car and the measuring equipment. Do you also have the camera? I mean, can you?
We operate without the camera.
Yeah, no, okay. So you can drive around Utrecht, for instance, for or any particular area of Utrecht, and you collect that data. Will that data then be for the Data and Knowledge Hub, or will it also be part of the Google's data sets for the whole wide world?
Well, as I said, everything in the data knowledge hub, all the data that we collect is fair, is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And actually, we make all that data available via, for instance, at the Samen Meten platform, where the snuffle bike data is available, and we make all this data available so that actually people can use it for new insights. So. We collect, we interpret ourselves, but we also make it available to the wider world to actually gain insights and develop new insights.
And Karen, are you giving away cars everywhere so that local communities can drive around? How does that work?
Yeah, no, we're not, because we don't have a lot of cars where we have dedicated them to a city to do scientific research like we have with Copenhagen and Amsterdam. The other cars we're driving is really taking advantage of the street view cars that are out driving anyways. In Copenhagen and Amsterdam, we really, and the London projects and California, we really focused and drove, we were taking 360 pictures, but we also, focused and drove many different drive passes so that we could work with Roll and work with the science partners to process that data. And just to clarify on some of the questions that Marita asked also is, yeah, we're donating the car and the air quality equipment. The data that we've collected in the past, like in California, that air quality data, that's currently available for scientific application now. I'm going to paste a link in the chat, which you can find out more information about the California data. And there's actually a link at the bottom to a Google form where you can request access to that data. And so that data is being shared openly in that way. And Copenhagen and Amsterdam, the data that we've been collecting for the air quality measurements will also be made open when we're completed the driving and all the scientific validation is completed in the coming months. So you can look forward to that.
So it will be open to anybody after you have validated everything. So it's not immediately shared with the world, but you do some work on it before it gets shared with the world.
Yeah, so that we can also create these insights.
Yeah. This was a question that also came from the chat from Roland Goedgeluk. Google has a lot of data. So what other combinations can you make? It's not just environmental data, right? You have data on how people move around, what they do, what they think of even. What combinations do you make?
So it's a great question. And I talked a little bit about the transportation emissions data that the insights that we build, the annual insights that we're building for now 3,000 cities in the EIE tool. That is taking that mobility data and aggregating it up in a privacy-aware way so that it's annualized and aggregated to the city boundary. And that's really because, we want to protect privacy at the same time as creating useful aggregated insights that cities can use for climate action. And so, there's a balance that we need to be made, and the insights that we have made available for the transportation emissions and the building emissions, that is Google Maps data that's aggregated enough so that it does protect privacy. I can say more kind of about other data potentially, such as open satellite data and other data that we make available for scientists to process. But so there is other data that we share and make available in open data catalogs. But when we think about combining different Google data sets, that's
people would get
helpful
worried
to that. Yeah.
So Roel and Jeff, what kind of data would you like to have? There's also already a question here. The noise, for instance, that's also one you could really easily measure by driving around in the city. Noise levels around construction works, around roads and so forth. But Jeff and Roel, what is the data you would ideally have to make cities healthier? What would be useful?
Well, I think we have the data. To be honest, I mean, I think between, I don't think it's a question of getting more data. I think it's a question of knowing what to do with it. You know, I would say this lived experience data would be, I think, is important to have. What we started doing is using community researchers. So we make sure that local folks that live in these neighborhoods, right? If you look at that map of Oakland, and you can see some of the areas that are especially, you know, with a lot of air pollution, we think it would be amazing to, you know, engage some local people, get them to go out, collect some experience, but what does it look and feel like on the street with this other data happening? Where are people exercising? Where are they spending time? And that would be enough. Combining that with that, you know, be quantitative, but also you have some of their stories, some of their just first person insights of actually living there. I think we can combine. I think we're missing the human stories. I think we got lots and lots of other data sets, and then the question is how do you connect the two? And that, I think, is the challenge,
Well,
not just for.
I mean, I seriously live next to the Ring 18 around Amsterdam, you know, very unhealthy environment. I know this, the data will show it. I don't even have to look it up, it's there. But the moment you start saying, okay, this is the emission data, and this is the cancer data for my area, and suddenly things start to happen, right? I mean, that's one example. But I could also imagine there are other types of data that we need. Roel, what kind of data are you looking for?
Well, I mean, there's of course data that we don't have at the moment. So for instance, why did we start with a mobile platform to measure ultrafine particles? And that is because ultrafine particles are not measured currently in the regulatory station. So there is no information that we actually could use. And so to be able to collect a lot of data on new risks, these mobile platforms are a good way to start building up that knowledge base. I think one of the data that we are missing, and Hanneke Kruijse made a comment in the chat from the RIVM, was where does this data come from where these children are? And that was really hard labor by Jeff and his team to actually think about where are people in space and time, and how does that interact? And I think one of the compelling stories of the Copenhagen project is where we bring this environmental data, of which we already have quite a bit, together with more insights of where people are, and that makes it much more relatable and makes the problem much more visible of where we actually have this conflict, if you want to speak in those terms, between unhealthy circumstances and where people want to be or need to be. And I think that was one of the data sources that we actually have much less. And I think if we think about power, and Jeff can reflect on that, the power was actually to make that combination of the 3-year-old, where is the 3-year-old, and what happens to that 3-year-old?
Yeah, agreed.
So could it also be that because we can now have data on such a very local level by street or even side of the street, that could help in getting more people activated on a very local level to take measures and to take action? Because if it's only on city level, and Jeff already described all the issues that play when you have to get the city to act on data, I mean, there's a lot of steps. But if you know that your street has a real problem, maybe that would help getting more action and more, maybe taking a bit more responsibility from those responsible for that street. Do you think that will help? I mean, I'm just looking for, if Jeff says we actually have all the data we need, we just need action, I think, so what is the additional action we could get from having these very fine localized data?
Well, I can just say something very quickly, which is, you know, we talked to a lot of cities for our project, and a lot of them say that one of the big advantages of these hyperlocal maps are that the public residents really react to them, and it really starts a conversation. I'll also say that yeah, I lost my train of thought. I think the sleep is getting to me. But yeah, go on. Go next, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've contemplated some different strategies, right? Because you could say, you know, might we create and we've done this, sketched it out already as draft of principles of that citizens can begin to argue for, this idea of moving some moving places to sit in the center of the block, prioritizing improvements along key routes for kids, thinking about how you might shift. I mentioned before this time issue. A lot of these young kids, they're out in the morning, and that's also sometimes it corresponds with rush hour traffic. So can we think about either shifting some traffic at certain times of day, or talking to the daycares about that? So these are they're kind of fine-grained human shifts, but we can think about some toolkits and some principles, sort of that we can give citizens to say, hey, here are your talking points. Use these concrete vocabulary and these concrete suggestions to talk to your elected officials, to talk to other stakeholders. We think that would be a really great next step.
I know what I was going to say, and you helped me remind me, Jeff. It's that some of the changes that the public are going to have to take or make as a result of policies by the city are not going to be always comfortable, right? I mean, it may mean getting out of the car. I think about my city here and me having, biking to work, an hour to work. That may not be easy, but if I understand why, and I see with my own eyes, the benefit it can bring, and I see the effect it's having on me or my family or my parents or whatnot, it helps. So I think it goes back to kind of that up-leveling the conversation so that people are talking about it more and willing to make changes maybe a little bit more.
I think
on that note, because there's 3 minutes, and in those 3 minutes, I just want to ask Hanneke to quickly tell something about what's going to happen next. And as promised, our speakers are staying around after 11, so we can, continue the conversation. And then, we're also going to ask people in the audience to just ask their questions directly, not via me, but just ask them directly. So, Hanneke, first of all, quick word from you. Yes. I'm really enjoying this series of webinars. So
I do. I have those 95 centimeters old kids walking around. So I honestly, I really get excited about these kind of projects and how tangible it becomes when you are really looking at a street and people's behavior. So yeah, many thanks already for everyone contributing to the Spatial 3 series we've had so far. We started with Meccano, Urban Sync, about healthy design principles and concept development. We talked about a great opportunity, a potential of digital twin in that. How can we use such tools to visualize and engage people in what decisions to make? And last but not least, a big thank you for our guest speakers of today's and tonight for Karen of today's webinar. So I do this and in Digital Vision. Many thanks for that. And I keep it short. There were already questions in the chat about what's coming next. We are currently planning new special events on citizen science. We will take it over the Christmas time and start fresh again in January. So please keep our website. If you follow us on LinkedIn, so you'll be updated very soon on that. And of course, this webinar is being recorded. The other ones were recorded as well. Those will be placed. The videos will be placed next week on our site for everyone who did not have the time right now to join these sessions. So this was very short, my intermezzo of what's coming next. Back to you, Monique.
All right. Well, for everybody that has to leave now, thank you so much for being here. 1 minute left for your next meeting, because that's how we schedule meetings these days. One after another. And for everybody else, we'd love to get more questions from you guys. And because it was so busy in the chat, there might be some questions that I didn't even see. So if you have questions, it would be great if you can ask them again. You can say who they're for, and you can also, let me see. Okay. there are things going on. I have one question to start with for Roel. Imagine you have equipment to measure 10 cities or local communities, or groups of people that want to know more about the data in the city. Just do a request with you, and then you send the car out, or how are you planning to do that?
Well, I mean, there's two thoughts here. One, of course, is that we would love to be in contact with people that have ideas where this kind of insights can help, and they can just reach out to the Data and Knowledge Hub, and we'll design and see how we can put a project together that would render useful and actionable insights. But I also wanted to extend this discussion a little bit, that it's not only about this mobile platform. We talked about the sniffer bikes by putting sensors on bikes. There are citizen science projects. Mobile equipment can be put on buses, on trams in cities, on municipality vehicles. So we would also love to talk about how to scale up these kind of data collections. That doesn't have to go through any party per se, but I think we can scale up this concept massively by working together. The beautiful thing is that if we bring all that data together from all these different initiatives, may that be stationary distributed networks or mobile networks, that's where the power will arise, that if we can bring that all together. So it's a broader discussion than only these platforms.
All right. Guys, do send your questions in. There's 78 of you out there that think like, oh, I'll hang around. Maybe, maybe Monique asks a question, but you can ask questions as well. I was wondering, purely from the tech point of view, I mean, the measuring tools are there. Is there new tech coming up that excites you guys? I mean, you are in this field, you follow what's going on. What will happen 5-10 years from now that you think, like, oh, that will be really useful to have as well as a measuring tool, but also maybe in the analysis of all the data that comes in. I mean, that's a whole new field as well, of course. Getting alerts, don't go out on Monday at 10:30 because your street is unsafe. What are you looking forward to? What's going to happen? Give us a bit of a view of the future of this. Anybody?
Well, yeah. I mean, one thing that we've been thinking a lot about is, there's a lot of talk. I think there's 100 cities now that have signed carbon neutrality declarations, and we see just a big push for that, right? So I think it'd be interesting to see two things. Can we directly correlate at all CO2 emission reduction with air quality improvement? Or so finding the CO2 air pollution connection would be super interesting, so that we make sure that as cities are becoming neutral, they are taking this into account. And then the second thing is, can we get again, when colleagues and folks that we talked to when we started doing this project, they were a little bit afraid. They're like, what if all of our cities become, have great air quality, but then are deserted, sort of, horrible places to live? So I think we also need to make sure that we have equally convincing metrics around quality of life, again, for many different people, to then connect with these, CO2 neutral metrics or air pollution metrics. So that would also be great to see the connectivity there.
Also, but what if the data shows that all these cities without cars are boring places? I mean, what if the data shows a negative instead of a positive? I mean, we all think it will be positive, of course, but...
Well, I mean, I think you have to, that's legitimate, right? I mean, a concrete example, I'm not, I know Karen knows Market Street in San Francisco. Maybe the other folks don't, but that's a place where, now they've banned cars on that street, and I could make an argument that that's not a good thing. I think banning cars generally is like unrealistic, and it's a maybe not the best policy, as an example. So it doesn't have to be so black and white, but we can limit vehicles and make sure that they're in the right place, and integrate it with public transit and walking and cycling. So to me, it's not a question. If someone says, oh, Monique, I think it's just like it's too black and white. I think cars are going to be there for a while, and that's okay. Cities can be okay with some cars.
What about you, Karen? What tech is coming up? What future do you see for this?
I mean, I have sensors on the brain right now because we just, went through a pretty big fire season. We're not done with it here in California, and now it's California, Oregon, and Washington, and up into Canada, and it's starting earlier, ending later, and I got my first purple air this year, and so did almost everybody I know. And so it's, I know we have a reason why we're buying them here and why California, is now completely covered with purple air, and Oregon and Washington with purple air sensors. But I do think that it's making people more aware. And I think that that as sensors get more affordable, as they get smaller, as they get more reliable, I'm excited to see what that will do for citizen science, for cities.
End up walking around with sensors. Will we all have our personal sensors with us so that we can be our own measuring station, so to speak?
Potentially. I mean, I'm more excited. I'm less excited about that, although that is interesting because I think that it's a very challenging problem. But we should still think about it. I'm more excited about the fabric of a sensor on every city block, and just having this micro surface of in cities, every city having the same way that in most cities cell coverage is ubiquitous, having air quality concentration be ubiquitous. I mean, that would, and not coarsely like it is in many cities, but very fine grained, and maybe then of course paired with regulatory monitors that are helping to correct it in real time. Some of the error that may be part of these lower cost sensors. So this is, I think, just all starting, and we've seen some like maybe small examples of it, but I'm excited for it to be really take off across the world in every city.
Can I ask Karen a question?
Really interesting with your videos just there. You just sort of move. There you go.
Roll is copying back and forth.
What is the tech that the Data Knowledge Hub is looking into? I mean, the innovations. What innovations? Not what's already there, but what is coming. What are you looking at?
Okay. Well, I think we always look at not a tech push, but a tech pull, and that is not that I'm against a tech push per se, but I think what we are looking for is to make data actionable. So how can actually data lead to significant changes that actually are impactful on human health? That's really the thing that and tech has some play in that as well. As other processes, transformative change is not only done by tech, but it has to do with involving our citizens and many more aspects. But what I see as the future, which would I be very excited about, is that if we get this very agile data on our environment, you can use that for forecasting. So what's going to happen tomorrow? Can we actually change our traffic behavior tomorrow? Can we change our individual behavior tomorrow? It would allow basically what we talk about in digital twins, simulations of interventions. So what happens if we actually change something in our environment? What do we expect that the impact will be? But more importantly, who will be affected by that change? So that allows that as well. And in the end, I think one of the important things that was brought forward by Ronald Goedgeluk in the chat was we need this data also to not ex ante expect what interventions will do, but actually it will provide us at a certain moment, if we get this kind of view that Karen puts out, that we actually have this continuous stream of environmental data, we actually can start to evaluate all the interventions that are happening. And that's really important because we have really little data on what the effectiveness is of the interventions that are currently being implemented. They are done with all good intentions, But what really the evidence is and what the impact will be is something that is still developing. And I think we need that, because we need to move to evidence-based city planning where, and Jeff is completely right, we have to combine the sustainability agenda with the health agenda. It's actually one agenda, and we have to actually combine those to actually get to what I call the neighborhoods of the future, that are healthy, that are climate neutral, and yeah, so that's my vision.
Yeah. So not data to get new policies, but data to show if policies work or not. Yeah, exactly. There is a question in the chat from Tabia. Tabia, do you want to put on your mic and ask the question yourself? That would be nice. You know, just a little microphone on the bottom of the screen, and then you ask the question yourself. Is that okay? Tabia Sonnenschein, if you're still here.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, excellent.
Thanks. So I would just read the question. It's directed at Jeff. Do you notice at Gehl people that there's like almost universal determinants of behavior, or are there variations between cities? So does culture play a role, or geography? So do we actually have to repeat these hyperlocal social behavioral studies everywhere, or can we transfer findings, because that would increase scalability substantially, right? So
Good question.
Yeah, great question. Super interesting. I think it's a little bit of a combination. So we do know a few things are universal. People like to sit with their back against a wall. We know that transparency in the ground floor gives us a sense of time being faster. So when we walk along an interesting frontage, we think that walk was shorter than it actually was, whereas if we walk along a boring frontage, we think it takes a longer time, right? So we have a whole sort of series of things about behavior and our perception of our city that we know to be relatively universal. And I always get nervous saying stuff like this in front of Roll, because who knows if like all the science is like 100% backing this up. But from a lot of observation of humans, we've seen this, right? So there are some things, but I really shy away from any kind of universal determinant, because there are so many. That's the beauty of cities and the beauty of randomness of human interaction, right? Because there's so many other things that are truly hyperlocal. So when I think about scale, I think about two things. One, what Roel mentioned before, we need to measure the actual impact. Like I wish we just would have gone out and put up, 1,000 euros worth of foliage at the 95 centimeter height and then just measured if it changed the air quality at all. Like I want micro experiments, but real life micro experiments that we could study, and then if it works a few times, then we can scale it, right? But I think we still need to get a little bit more hyperlocal experiential insight and make sure that we have general principles that could be manifested a little bit differently in different places. I get very nervous about like the universal one size fits all solution.
But the behavioral data that Tabia was referring to, and this question of, can you scale the research in that by sort of making some things, easier or applicable for all cities? Of course, Google has a lot of behavioral data that you wouldn't have to research because it's already there in the system. Maybe at the moment it cannot be combined, but it's there. When the little kids go out for a walk, well, their mothers or their teachers, Google knows where they are because the phones are on them. So is there a future imaginable where, anonymized, Google already knows how different people are in different cities, right? When they go outside, when they're inside, when people move, when people walk or cycle or take a car because you know where they are. Is anything going to combine there?
Well, I mean, first, I think it's important to know that not everybody uses Google, and some people, don't opt in to use Google Maps and things like that. So obviously,
but as a research sample, you're doing quite well.
I understand. Yeah, that makes sense. But I just want to make that sure that's clear. But yeah. So privacy is like a primary value for Google, and so it is difficult to use things like even aggregated mobility data is difficult to use for research, even for Googlers inside Google, or even for like research teams inside of Google is what I mean, and Googlers, of course. So I don't really know how to answer that question except to say that there are some projects like the COVID mobility dashboard, the COVID mobility reports that both Google and Apple kind of aggregated and shared out, and the environmental insights, transportation emissions that we've aggregated and actually taken it to be, in my opinion, even more valuable because we've applied these emissions factors to it already. So now, based on this mobility data, broken out by automobile, public transportation, bicycle, pedestrian, cities can take that data and say, okay, how much CO2 equivalent tons are being emitted per year by these different modes. And so so a lot of that work is done for them. So we want to do more work like this. I think we want it to be grounded in science, and we want it to be most useful for cities. So
there was another interesting question that Roel already answered a little bit from Branka. But Branka, could you unmute yourself and ask us the question, because it's also about data and people's behavior, and maybe not via cities and authorities and people that need to take decisions, but directly. You switch on your mic and ask us? If you're still there, of course. Oh, I only have headphones. Okay, I'll read it out for you. I'll read it out. No worries about it. Where is the question? Yes. Good sensors provide additional information on how people's behavior and movements are impacted by some of these factors like air quality, noise pollution, temperature. There's also availability of lighting, so the lights in the city. So basically using sensors to figure out more decisions and human behaviors connected to other things than how do I get somewhere quickest, then is the air quality here doing well. Roel, you are working on this, I understand.
Yes, we are. And I think one of the important things that we have not too much data on is actually the behavior of people that have in their environments. And so this is really what we try to understand more. And with that, I mean, indeed, how do people actually interact with their living environments? What if you change traffic flows, or what happens when you change the food environment? So when you start changing the food supply in healthy versus unhealthy, how do people then behave in those kind of environments? So what we do currently is a lot of studies where we actually see how people actually, where they move in space and time, and how they actually interact with that environment. It then becomes interesting to change that picture by saying, okay, what if we change that environment? Does it then actually change the behavior, or are people, and we all know that, we are also very good in finding other solutions to keep on doing what we do. So that's really what I meant with knowing the impact of interventions. I know what the impact sometimes of an intervention is on air quality, but I don't know how people will actually change their behavior in that sense, or so on. So I think that's really also where Gehl, I think, pointed towards, that interaction is what we need. And those micro experiments that Gehl is talking about are hugely important. And I think this is where we really have to think as a community, because evaluating scientifically a micro experiment is almost impossible. But we can if we have many of those micro experiments and learn from one to the other. And so that's also really the call out here to everybody that's still in the chat, and municipalities, people that do these micro experiments, to see if we actually can work together to build up that knowledge base. So that's really my plea to the rest out here.
Yeah, very good. And we still have 56 people waiting and burning to ask their question. 56 people, 55. Somebody leaves right away when I say that. If there are more questions from the audience, I'd love to hear them. Maybe no. Well, I think in that case, unless what is the question you have for each other? Is there anything you want to point out at the end of this discussion, which was very interesting, as a way forward for everybody? Jeff, what's your next project? What city are you going to measure and redesign next?
Yeah, well, we're working in London right now with in South London, and it's a focus there not only on young children but also adolescents and the elderly. Of course, there's an impact there. I think one of the questions was this, has COVID changed some of these discussions? And we see the London case is interesting. On the one hand, we saw a lot of people there say when air quality levels improved, pollution goes down during the COVID lockdowns, air quality improved. We thought, hey, this is a great opportunity to show what can be done through behavior change. But what we were met with is a lot of folks that said, no, this shows you that you cannot get sustainability with economic progress. Because the only reason why the air quality went up is because everything was closed and the country was in ruins economically.
Air quality to improve that.
Yeah. So we're trying to kind of actively engage in that discussion and through some micro experiments, which I love to do more of, to be able to prove that actually no, we can get these two things together. And then we'll also hope to that we have another project here is in another location in Copenhagen where we can begin to apply some of these principles. So those
and then you get your little shrubs and trees up and
yeah, exactly.
Karen, for you, I have the feeling at the moment that the big decisions on air quality and ambitions are being taken in a lot of Asian countries at the moment. There's a lot of momentum there. Are you also especially working there with this, measurement project?
Yeah, we have a couple of cars focused in Southeast Asia and Indonesia. Others. I think we're still figuring it out. We actually had many of the cars ready to start capturing air quality, and then COVID hit. So they've been grounded and waiting till the lockdowns lift, et cetera. Yeah, and we've been talking to a lot of cities. I mean, my big focus right now is, incorporating more air quality information in EIE, in that Explorer tool, to do, to try to do exactly what both Jeff and Roel are talking about, is combine that climate action and sustainability planning, combine air quality into that process so that cities can, take a holistic view, think about these solutions around air quality impacts together with other data. It's exciting time.
Last for you, Roel. I mean, if there's any last call to action, you already mentioned, let's share our micro experiments.
It's two things. Let's share them and let's do them. And that's also, I think, of course, the question that came up in this debate, right? We did this project in Copenhagen. We came up with alternatives and clean zones, and it's now really up to the city to see if we can implement them. And I think that's my call is to really pick that up together. And I would like to see, and that's also actually my question to Jeff would have been basically how do we make that next step? I mean, what is holding us up at the moment to not actually do the two plans that Jeff put up on the screen?
Yeah, I think it's just funding. It's as simple as that. It's funding for the relatively small budgets to do it.
Okay. Well, lots to work.
Easier said than done.
Sure.
Lots to do. Well, for the three of you, keep up the good work. Thank you so much for contributing to this webinar. I mean, this is amazing for 7 people still around for an hour and a half. Thank you so much, all the delegates, for being here. And as promised, the video will be published on the website of the Data and Kennis Hub next week, I think. So thank you again, and hope to see you back in January. And thank you.
Thank you all. A real pleasure to.
Thank you all. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.